the shadow aid is really to make sure that he can keep up with the school, but not actually the one yang buatkan untuk dia.
So it's incorporating all of these skills into the student. So for us to be able to fade to the back of class or eventually outside of class.
But Mama, we are all here. That's why we started Kita Family, to say that, there are days that you feel like giving up, but you keep going because one day your child's going to surprise you by doing something that you never thought they could do.
I love how Nadira mentioned, give that opportunity to learn. And Benji just said it beautifully in a different way.
Hello, selamat datang ke Kita Family Podcast episod ke-86. Terima kasih kerana masih bersama kami, dan kami di Kita Family ini hari ini mempunyai episod yang istimewa di mana kami mempunyai dua tetamu khas yang ada di studio, dan topik kita pada hari ini juga menarik. Tapi sebelum itu, sebagai kenalan, kami di Kita Family akan membincangkan perihal berkaitan dengan makna serta kepentingan hidup bermasyarakat, menghargai keunikan serta kepelbagaian sesama kita dan meraihkan masyarakat yang berbilang agama, kaum, kepercayaan, rupa dan juga keupayaan. Kita menghargai hidup secara inklusif yang mengambil kira keperluan segenap lapisan masyarakat, terutama mereka yang kurang atau berkelainan upaya. Today is such a special episode. With me in the studio is Kakak SK.
Apa khabar?
And with us, there are two special guests today. We have Datin Wira Nadirah Mannan, who is from Axon Child Development Center, a children's center. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Assalamualaikum.
And also Benji Wong. Benji Wong is here as a PLA.
Hai, salam sejahtera.
Okay, apa itu PLA? Iaitu dalam bahasa Malaysia, pembantu pendamping. Okay, a word that even I just learned in bahasa Malaysia because I've always known them as personal learning assistants. Our special episode today is dedicated to what it's like to understanding personal learning assistants, PLAs, ataupun lebih dikenali sebagai shadow aid. Okay, episode yang sangat menarik. So let me give you just a brief introduction of our guests today. You know their names, and I will start with Puan. Sorry, I know, because a fellow mom, right? So I always keep calling her Puan, but she's actually Datin Wira. Datin Wira Nadirah. Okay, she is the chairman of Axon. Right, she has twin brothers with autism, as we all know. But better than that, she's also a mom and a parent, like the 5 podcasters on Kita Family, of a young boy called Nakib. Yes. She's a mom of 3, and Nakib is her oldest. Middle child. Yes. And she's also an audiologist by profession. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Benji is someone I have personally known for 15 years. We realized recently that's how long our friendship, and to me, he's part of the extended family. Benji is somebody who started his career as a volunteer teacher in an EIP program, which is the Early Intervention Program. And he started it when he was in his first year of undergraduate studies. And he moved to full-time work in 2011 as a PLA, personal learning aid, and a behavioral therapist supporting students across various international schools. He finished his master's in special needs in 2017 and went on to form and lead an intervention team for a special education needs boy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 2019. And later on his return home, thank God he came home, he led some PLA teams across the Klang Valley International Schools. And in 2024, he founded an inclusive school in Petaling Jaya that deals with a variety of disabled students many different types, whether physical or neurodevelopmental, and that's what he does today.
Thank you.
There's something else that you need to know about him. Benji ni suka kerja sukarelawan. Dia pernah ke Sri Lanka untuk buat kerja amal to the war zone
In Jaffna.
in Jaffna, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about that, because that was very interesting, Benji.
So that was actually under the Nottingham University. So we were selected to visit two schools, one boys' school and one girls' school in Jaffna, to run different programs. So we had an English program and an inclusive program. So inclusive program in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, is almost non-existent today. Yeah. So that is quite new, and it's quite eye-opening to see a village school in Jaffna.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And he also does teach for Malaysia.
Not teach from Malaysia. Yes, I mean I do help
Yeah.
a little bit, but not officially. Not officially
As a volunteer.
as a fellow. So I do help out with the indigenous people. So we do. I've started a kampung school as well, and
Nice.
I've brought students onto trips as well.
Okay. So that's a little bit of a background, but let's dive straight into it, yeah, Kakak?
Indeed. Let's do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome ya, selamat datang ya.
Thank you.
Our valued guest. Istilah PLA ini mungkin baru untuk some of the audience ya. And I'm so happy today that Benji always got a great heart, and as fellow mother, the experience
Yeah.
of having the PLA support. So maybe I can start with Benji.
Mhm.
Benji, help us understand istilah PLA ni. What is the role and what is the assistance that a PLA render? Is it only academic or what other areas? Share with us.
So as a start, a successful PLA, or also known as a shadow aide, is someone that functions within the school environment. And I always measure success by if the teachers or the school does not even notice us in school. That's why I think back then many parents noticed that I like to wear black, all black. So it is also practical, and also for us to be least noticeable within the school environment to help students function within the school environment. So we actually help students across the board, all the way from. So of course, when we talk about school, academics come to mind. However, before academics, we have to work with their social skills, with their emotional skills, self-regulation. So all of this comes before academic.
Okay.
So you were dressing up symbolically lah.
Yes, that's right.
As a shadow.
That's right.
As a shadow. Can you give us a little bit more contoh when you mention emotional support?
Okay, so going to school, many of us take for granted that going to school is just school.
Mhm.
However, school is a new environment. It's a foreign environment for many students, not only neurodiverse but even neurotypical. So to cope with new environment, new changes, new structure, instructions as well from teachers, all of this can be at times overwhelming. So that's where we function, and we help students self-regulate themselves, or we work towards self-regulation. And the end goal of a shadow aide is independent, and that is very, very important. And we'll get a little bit more into that later.
Okay. Maybe I just then ask Mama, Datin Wira Nadirah. Of course, as a parent, we would like to give our children as much help, or assistance. Share with us your interaction and your experience.
It's really interesting because masa saya diperkenalkan dengan konsep PLA atau shadow aide ni, I have no idea what it was about. And I didn't think that I would need it so early on in my child's life. So what happened was, masa tu Nakib was only about 3 years old. And it was mid 2024. So he had a biting face. Kan? Neurodivergent kids needing that sensory inputs. So he was literally biting everyone. Except me. Because maybe I was his source of comfort. So, tapi it wasn't, it was really a tough period because every day saya akan dapat surat dari cikgu. Hari ni Nakib gigit cikgu ni. Hari ni Nakib gigit tu. Tapi mostly adults. Yang saya rasa mungkin sebab dia rasa adult sepatutnya faham apa yang dia nak. Tapi mungkin sebab ialah bila dalam kelas, it was in a preschool, mainstream preschool. So cikgu-cikgu ni mungkin tak sempat lah nak attend to his needs. So maybe he thought that by biting, he would get their attention. But as a mom, I was like dreading to send him to school. If I can say at that point of time, I memang rasa nak give up pun ada. Sebab anak saya ni baru 3 tahun. Tapi macam susah pula nak hantar ke sekolah sebab, you know, having these biting issues. So, kebetulan masa tu memang time dia untuk jumpa his developmental pediatrician, Dr. Rajini. And she suggested, how about you explore shadow aids? And I was like, what's that kan? Nak tanya siapa? I don't know anybody who has shadow aids. Right? So where do I start? Lepas tu mungkin boleh tanyalah. So I asked around. And somebody shared me a resume, and rest I would say history lah sebab setakat ini Nakib has had 4 shadow aids to date to support him, and I did not regret that decision. And I actually enjoyed working collaboratively with the shadow aid sebab they are not supposed to be like a babysitter or a nanny, tapi mereka adalah someone yang facilitate his learning experience sebab kita dah ada cikgu dekat sekolah. The shadow aid is really to make sure that he can keep up with the school, but not actually the one yang buatkan untuk dia. And like Benji said just now, it's about, the end goal is about him being independent. Nakib is not quite there yet, but I think itulah journey-nya. So when it comes to Axon's stand on this, it's like bila saya sendiri dah melaluinya, I feel like a lot more people should also get this support as well. Sebab I think kita di fasa, I would say fasa lah in Malaysia itself, yang education awareness is better, kan? Since you mentioned about my brothers, I don't think they even had that, you know, opportunity to have shadow aids back then. But right now, like people know more, and then they start early therapy because I've been sending Nakib for intervention since 18 months old. So bila dah come to that 3 years old tu, pun masih lagi macam perlukan the additional support. Sebenarnya memang rasa frustrating lah. And in fact, sebenarnya before coming to this session, I was scrolling down my messages with Dr. Rajini. Boleh pula message personally. But I remember, I forgot about this. But apparently I wrote to her. I said, I couldn't believe that I told you that I felt like a failure during the session. Itu memang yang part yang I memang ingat sangat. And looking back, thinking back, yang I tak tahu apa nak buat. Sebab I rasa I failed my child. Dia terharu sikit.
I think as all parents of neurodivergent children, we feel that at some point. You know, but Mama, we are all here. That's why we started Kita Family, to say that, you know, there are days that you feel like giving up, but you keep going because one day your child's going to surprise you by doing something that you never thought they could do. So we're going to come back to the PLA thing. And I need to ask you, when you said he's had 4 shadow aids. Now, can you speak a bit more about that? Firstly, how did you go about looking for one? And then how did you encounter these 4? And what was your thought process when choosing those individuals?
So I'm quite particular. So, you know.
As you should be.
So when I was suggested to look for a shadow aid, first I actually advertised on Facebook. There's this special needs group, special needs advocacy group, I think.
What's it called?
I think it's called
It wasn't
Special
there when I
Needs
needed one.
Advocacy Group. Yeah, so I joined that and I just wrote I need a PLA for this for my child and I'm based in Cyberjaya. Send me your resume. And surprisingly, actually a lot of people sent in their resumes. I mean, not like many, but I got quite a few. And at the time, because one of my friends actually saw my advert, so she said that she knows somebody who did that before. So I engaged with that person. Kami actually ada interview. I actually got her to come to the house to meet Nakib because I think first ialah rapport dengan anak kita ni lah. Sebab
Which
basically
I think
you
can be
kena
quite challenging.
yeah, sebab you memang nak kena jaga
Yes.
dia and kena
Yeah.
ikut dia kan.
If there's no rapport,
Exactly.
regardless how good your skill is, it doesn't work.
Yeah, so itu yang I think the thing about Shadow 8 ni, it's not a one size fits all solution.
Absolutely.
So
You're not hiring an accounts executive.
Exactly kan. So dia datang nampak macam okay, and then of course I'm very particular in the sense of experience itself. Yang do you even know what a special needs child is kan? Sebab dia lain sebenarnya kan dengan anak-anak yang lain semua tu. So kalau you tak pernah tahu, maybe you akan tak ada kesabaran tu. You tak ada that passion to help juga kan. Because yelah dia macam-macam cabaran sikit. Tapi not to say yang Nakib itself is a very challenging child ke apa. It's just that I think I want it to be the right support for him kan. So that's how I engage the first one. But I think yelah macam tadi kita ada discuss kejap sebelum our session ni. Benda ni kan tak ada regulation. So there were days yang dia tak datang. Kan, and then you don't have like
Backup plan.
explicit contract to say
What
yang
happens, right?
kan. So okay, and then I think it just mutually decided that tak apalah, dia pun ada hal dia, I pun rasa maybe not the best fit. I move on to the next person that sent in her resume. And I got an amazing one.
Bless.
She's Felicia, now in Australia, unfortunately. Why Felicia? But at first, masa interview tu, itulah sebab dia punya background pula psychology, and she also ada sister special needs. So yang tu memang antara, I perasan lah, kriteria utama yang, the passion will be there if they have a family member yang ada special needs kan. Sebab they understand better lah
If
biasanya.
you got skill, no passion pun tak jadi.
Exactly. Sebab yelah, you macam nak tolong jaga anak orang, tapi what's in it for you, you know what I mean kan. Tapi sebab dia rasa yang macam, if I can help this child, sebenarnya I pun sedikit sebanyak rasa yang I'm also helping, my own sibling and whatnot. So she was great. And dia lagi lah, dia cakap, no, I'm only here for 3 months, okay. Sebab memang dia dari awal dia tahu yang Shadow 8 is not supposed to be a permanent role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was like surprised I dapat orang bagus macam ni awal-awal, but somehow it turned into a year. But at the same time, so much progress because we engage quite actively in the sense yang bila Nakib ada therapy session, he would actually join in juga, and she would give her input at school, apa yang dia observe, and then dia akan feedback juga kalau Nakib tengah struggle, because that's the whole point, right? Macam I can only know so much from what has been conveyed or reported to me, tapi dia dapat hands-on observation and ni. So it was really, I would say, one of the best decision lah. And she really made effort as well. So itu yang menjadikan journey tu worthwhile juga for Nakib and I mean the whole family lah. Because when we know he's getting the right support, kami pun boleh bertenang, like tak fikir alamak nanti ada dapat lagi ke report, that kind of thing. And so that was really nice lah to have Felicia.
So can I just ask, sejak ada Shadow 8 ni, ada tak surat daripada sekolah?
Tak ada kecuali bila Shadow 8 tu tak datang. Because they are humans too. So sometimes adalah dia MC ke apa kan. So but yeah, because the surat tak sempat nak datang sebab Shadow 8 tu dah tolong, orang kata mengharmonikan keadaan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say Shadow 8 tu ada tolong untuk memberitahu kepada cikgu macam mana nak handle Nakib dan ataupun what Nakib's preference is ataupun memperkenalkan Nakib dengan satu lensa yang berlainan?
Oh, that's actually a really interesting question sebab I rasa what they do is mereka macam really be near to Nakib, but they don't really tell the teacher sebab I think the whole point ialah they do not want to highlight nakib tu kan.
Okay,
Sebab bila you
betul.
beritahu siap-siap, so terus macam teacher sudah ada that kind of bias or perception yang nakib tak boleh buat ni, nakib tak boleh buat tu, ataupun nanti provoke nakib ke or trigger nakib on certain things kan. So I think they have been supporting in a sense yang bila dia tahu nakib tengah struggle, dia akan masuk untuk okay nakib, it's okay, take your time. Sebab sometimes nakib has had like, yelah kalau tak cukup tidur ke, atau maybe I fed him with too much sugar the night before. So
Or the weather's different.
yeah
on that day.
kan. Oh yeah, dia putera lilin. So apa ni, the shadow aid will actually have that moment with him, time out. So those kind of things lah yang sangat membantu. Sebab kita tahu cikgu tak boleh nak buat tu untuk semua. Walaupun sometimes he's in a classroom yang ada good teacher to student ratio, but at the end of the day they still have to jaga the whole class kan, bukan nakib saja. So the shadow aid really help.
So sebenarnya just listening, Nadira, you had to use a lot of your gut instinct. You use your initiative to sebahkan, to find the shadow aid. And actually, I want to move then that question to Benji. You've got over a decade of supporting very successfully many young peoples. You share with us, because we know sebenarnya in Malaysia, belum lagi ada the formality of defining what is a shadow aid. Sebenarnya shadow aid tu still now many different istilah ya. PLA ada, SEN pun ada, special education teacher, SENCO pun ada. So share with us in your training and your support lah. Very interesting story from a parent's perspective. Own initiative. Share with us how parents can select where to look even. Yeah, Nadira was quite fortunate lah. Ada dapat 4, semuanya tak setara lah ya. Tapi ada at least there's an individual who made a difference. Please Benji, help us understand.
So a shadow aid, the role of a shadow aid is eventually to phase ourselves out. So that is very, very important because this industry or this profession is not regulated. Therefore, and parents are also in a way a lot of times caught desperate. My child needs to go to school in January. It's November. It's December. I've got 3 more months. So because of desperation, a lot of parents are also quote unquote taken advantage of, and because of non-regulation, anyone in Malaysia can actually be a personal learning assistant or a shadow aid, as long as parents are happy. School is sometimes the school gets involved, sometimes the school does not get involved. So if the school gets involved, very well, and if the school is happy, parents happy, then let's go. However, there are times, and I've seen as well shadow aids in schools, and this is actually unethical, and it pains me to see that some behind the scenes they said, this is it's a comfortable job sometimes. And sometimes it can also be, some days can be easy, some days can be challenging, some days can be easy. And there are some easier ones that say, hey, then let's just keep the child. And that is what we call train dependency, which we totally want to avoid, and it's very, very unethical.
Benji, just to jump in.
Yeah.
Is there a shadow aid training program in Malaysia?
So at the current moment, under the Ministry of Education, no. So officially, no. However, I do know of certain centers, certain organizations which does shadow aid training.
Okay.
Maybe you can share with us.
Yes.
What are the ones that are available? Yeah, recognizing that belum lagi lah ada governing body. Yeah. What would be some attributes? Yeah. One that Datin mentioned was they have personal experience. This is the informal one. Personal experience of another person on the spectrum, for example. What would be the sum of the attributes that parents can look out for?
So as a shadow 8, we have to...
Or qualification. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Qualification, I think, regardless, it could be education, it could be special education, it could be psychology. However, above qualification, I think the heart has to be ready to render as much support as possible, as little as needed. So this is a very important attribute.
Okay, you've said it very loadedly. As much support as possible and as little as needed. How do you find that balance? I mean, you've been in this industry for 15 years. I'm sure sometimes you overcompensate or over-support, and sometimes you think back and think, should I have done more?
Or should I have done less?
Or should I have done less? So how do you reach that balance?
So let me give you an example. So I still remember very clearly a case study. Let's do a case study of a student in class. We are working on copying skills. So copying from table on blackboard. So as a shadow 8, we have to collaborate with teachers, both the teachers, the class, the student, the community, and also our principal, which is the student. So typically there is a pace of copying, and sometimes or most of the times the class teacher will accommodate to my principal. And eventually I know that I am supposed to be out of the class. So there are times where we have to make the call and say that, hey, we have to already move on. So I told the teacher, it's okay. He has not finished yet. Move on and let me manage it. And true enough, the first day we move on, the tantrum can be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Eventually, what we are working towards is no more tantrum. And if has moved on, if the slides move on, I've not copied in time, what I can do as a student, what I can do to solve my small problem. It's not a big problem. So it's incorporating all of these skills into the student. So for us to be able to fade to the back of class or eventually outside of class.
I think one of the word you study is collaborate. Yeah. So I think again pressing in this being there but not being there. Yeah. What is that collaboration? Yeah. There's the parents. There is the teacher in the class. I think also we mentioned earlier, there's a principal. Would you help us understand a little bit in a class context? We just paint a classroom in action. Would you give us a picture of it?
So a little bit about collaboration. I always picture collaboration as a triangle. Mm-hmm. And myself as a PLA, as a shadow 8, I'm one part of a triangle, one side. The other side is the parents, and the third side is the school. So back to your question, in the class setting, it is about also building relationship on behalf of my student, or help to pre-build relationship to ease my student in, and also relationship between my student and teachers as well. So sometimes if I can casually put, sometimes I have to keep us as students as well. Sometimes I have to keep us teachers as well. Because if my student cannot solve the problem, he will eventually, the goal is for him to ask help from his next buddy, or maybe from the friend behind. Because I'm not going to be there forever.
Yeah. So that social communication disorder is usually the gap.
Yes, correct.
So how does a PLA assist in or bridge that?
Bridge the gap.
Yes.
So we bridge the gap by social stories. We use social stories. We use different thinking skills, problem solving, recognizing different kinds of problems. Is this a big problem? Is this a medium problem? Is this a small problem? So once the students are able to recognize and break down the different levels of their problem, then they are able to take action on the problem.
So Benji, again, we're going back to the classroom setting. Yeah. You see a situation unfold. Okay. How do you teach that student that you are shadowing to solve that problem without disrupting the class? Because again, you are a shadow aide. You are supposed to allow the class to progress
naturally.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So, of course, the first step is the class will be disrupted, and therefore, like I mentioned again, the triangle. So my rapport with the teachers, with the school community must be. Sometimes we don't even have to say anything. I told the teachers, it's okay. Just go on. I say I will handle him, and then we know that it is coming, and it is a due process for the child as part of his or her developmental journey. So we work with teachers. We also work with friends as well. So sometimes if the friends, let's say if we know, if I know that my student can work very well with friend A, I will pre-tell friend A, hey, maybe you can learn the exercise book when he or she asks.
Okay. So we have started with the first segment, and we're going to take a short break because this has been a lot to unpack, and we will be back very soon to the second part of it on how else we support our children and neurodivergent children in classrooms and in schools with personal learning assistance. We will see you after the break. Selamat kembali ke episod ke-86 Kita Family Podcast. Bersama kami adalah dua tetamu khas, iaitu Datin Wira Nadirah dengan Benji Wong, dan kami sedang mendengar insight yang sangat mendalam berkenaan shadow aid atau personal learning assistance. Ini adalah satu opportunity untuk kami sebagai ibu dan bapa untuk belajar apakah peranan mereka dan bagaimana ia boleh efektif dalam membantu anak-anak neurodivergent untuk membuat transisi ke sekolah. Okay. Before the break, we were talking about the roles and what is it that a PLA does. Tetapi satu perkataan yang sering kami dengar adalah collaboration. So this is going to be interesting because I want to hear from both of you what would be your expectation for collaboration. Apakah yang anda memang nak untuk mencapai dengan PLA bila PLA itu bekerja dengan anak Puan Nadirah?
So I think that's a really important question sebenarnya, because as mentioned earlier, there's no one size fits all kind of solution. Bukannya bila kita dicadangkan untuk dapatkan shadow aid, itulah juga the solution for your child.
The golden key, right?
Exactly. So itu yang sangat penting bila ada that interview session, sebab I think I truly understand bila parents akan panic, nak make sure yang the child can actually attend school in time and whatnot, but schools are requesting, oh, you need a shadow aid to support your child. Kalau tak boleh masuk. I face rejections actually. Walaupun I ada shadow aid pun mereka tidak mahu menerima.
I think the helplessness, right, sometimes.
Yang I tak salahkan mereka, by the way, sebab I think we all, I think, truly believe that it's not easy in this journey for these neurodivergent children. I think semua cuba mainkan peranan yang terbaik untuk support the community, but of course the rejections were hard. Jadi apa yang sangat penting tu yang saya rasa ialah, satu, dengan shadow aid tu itself, kita kena set the goals for the child. Kan, sebenarnya expectations parents kadang-kadang tak sama pun dengan sekolah. Macam I'm okay for my child to not be in the best class ke apa. I okay untuk dia be in a lower grade, sebab itu pun kadang-kadang yang dicadangkan oleh doktor mereka. But for shadow aid, itulah yang mereka kena faham. And for the school as well, if they can accommodate to that, because we need to understand they're having other students as well. I think as I highlighted before kan. So I tak tahulah, mungkin I dah banyak exposure juga membuatkan I rasa I don't have high expectations, but I want to make sure I am doing my best for my child. So itu yang collaborativeness tu dia perlu berlaku dengan shadow aid, dengan sekolah and actually all the therapists as well. Sebab like I said, the shadow aid will be at the school, but I will give input like in family moments kan, at house, at home. Whereas shadow aid ni pula akan berada dalam kelas yang dia dapat bagi input. Oh okay, rupanya Nakib tak boleh buat ni lagi. Boleh ke you maybe check in dengan your therapist untuk apa yang kita boleh improve on this. So those are the things that I feed on lah. And in fact, I'm really lucky. I hantar Nakib ke sekolah yang every 3 months or quarter dia memang akan buat PTM.
So I just meeting.
Yeah. So bila ada meeting macam ni, saya akan bawa sekali shadow aid saya supaya dia pun bagi version dia, teachers pun bagi, and we all talk about it together. So what do we do next to improve? And adakah masih lagi perlukan that support from shadow aid? Sebab Nakib pun walaupun I said dah 2 tahun or 4 orang ni, but actually there were times yang dia bukan setiap hari. Dia dah win off jugalah sebenarnya. But now because he is starting new school, that's why the support is needed again untuk more intense sikit lah, and hopefully can progress. So I don't know Benji, what about your experience?
I think the key word yang banyak kali diulang is actually input. So input is what do we fall back onto. So the most structured way is actually data collection. So the data collection as well as mentioned just now, our gut feel. So our gut feel is a lot of time based on the data as well. So have we reached certain milestones? Have we reached certain goals that we set together as during parent-teacher meeting or during team meetings as well? And sometimes there are arrangements as well. More than one PLA in a team.
Yeah.
So let's say person one takes 2 days, the other person takes 3 days, and that way that is also one of a strategy so that the child is not overly attached or to one particular style as well.
Betul. And I think yelah bila having the experience as well from parents point of view, saya rasa shadow aid ni pun juga perlukan upskilling and training, because kalau dia cuma tag kepada this child, mungkin dia pun tak dapat that orang kata learning growth juga. So that's why yang I think I highlighted before dekat Axon, kita ada this Axon Per Families Network yang kita sebenarnya nak support all these stakeholders, the community, and that's where the idea of Axon PLA platform tu ada, because kita memang nak dapat support the children, but make sure with the right people jugalah, sebab untrained PLA can be actually harmful. Memudaratkan sebab you don't know what you're doing.
So if I can jump in a little bit, untrained PLAs, in my experience, I've seen Bibi, I've seen kakaks, I've seen aunties, or even nene also going to school. Correct. And in the end, the child actually regress. Even after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you can see the difference in the child. So
Because of the dependence?
Because of the dependency.
Dependence, and maybe yang tadilah input tak diberi dengan betul, sebab you kind of gotten comfortable yang is a family member yang tolong jaga kan, yang expectation.
And sometimes family member then parents pun segan.
Betul, tak boleh nak minta too much.
Correct.
Because it's I think another thing that maybe I didn't highlight just now, when my doctor suggested the developmental pediatrician suggested for shadow aid, kalau you mampu.
So memang the question of cost always comes up, but before we go there, as I was listening, sebenarnya for support, if we go back lah to tahap mana, what level of support, and both of you were really illustrating, there are certain times the support need to be, or certain functionality, it needs to be supported regularly, right? Intensively, in fact, kan? And
that's where we start off.
If the individual requires the intensive support. However, in that same individual, we also know certain functionality only more regularly, And the parents really, and Nenek Bibi too, is important in the very much more naturalistic.
It's still their village.
It is very important, But listening to both interaction, the feedback, the regular meeting. By being the professional, they have to go one more level lah, and the measurement. Yeah. So share with us a little bit more.
Yeah.
How then in that interaction,
And how to prevent the PLA from being a crutch, because I think what you talked about regression, the word that came to my mind was then the child gets a crutch and doesn't want to let go.
So we are keen to hear on how to
Stories.
step
Back.
or step down, but also having that ability to gauge professionally to help parents, to help the other pedana cikgu-cikgu, where is the step back, and in fact, when is the intensify? Share with us some story lah.
So I would bring another illustration to the table. So just now was in the classroom. So let's move to the canteen. So a particular student of mine back then really loved fried chicken and rice. Really loved fried chicken and rice. So every day it is fried chicken and rice until the canteen auntie would set aside. So I say, Kak, tak payah Kak. Biar je. Dia said, tak apa, nanti dia bergolek. I said, okay. Kita tolong 1 minggu. Janji ya? I said, okay. 1 minggu, she will keep aside. The reason behind is that my condition to the class in the classroom with the student is that first we finish our work, then we go for a break. So you can take as long as you want to finish your work.
Yep.
When the bell rings, I know already. So the teacher was like, "You sure?" I said, "Don't worry, just leave the work on the board.
Yep.
Just don't erase it. Leave it on the board. I will deal with it."
Yep.
So eventually, time management came into place as well. And because there's a motivation, snack time is coming up, break time is coming up. I want a particular snack. I want a particular break. So at the start, I would heavily support problem-solving skills. Again, different environment, different problem, but it is still problem-solving skills. You go to the canteen, the line is super long. Everybody loves fried chicken. And we know that the fried chicken will be sold out if you don't get there by a certain time. Of course, the canteen auntie would graciously, because the canteen auntie knows us already.
Yeah.
By then she would say, okay, tak apa, I simpan 1 portion. I said, boleh 1 minggu lah, you simpan. I said, janji by Friday, I said, kita janji 1 minggu je simpan. Minggu depan, kalau sampai ke tak sampai, sold out pun tak apa. Tak makan pun, of course, I have to again collaborate with parents. I say, if he doesn't eat lunch, is it okay? And honestly, some days we miss a meal. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. We'll be hungry for the last 2 periods. Then let's work on that. So eventually the child is self-motivated to say that, hey, I need to do this to achieve this, and I want to go for lunch because I'm also looking forward to my rice and fried chicken.
So you were using the cause and effect to motivate the child.
That is related to
the personal need of the child. Okay. And how did that work out? Usually when you use that strategy, how effective is it in your years of experience?
So to use a positive reinforcement, whatever the reinforcement is, it has to be relatable to the child. If it's not relatable to the child, you can get stickers, you can get stars, you can get whatever tokens. If it has no value to the child, we say shock sendiri lah. So it has to be relatable to the child and something that the child really values.
Okay, so Puan Nadira, how would you as a parent work with the therapist to say, oh boleh lah kalau hari ni dia tak makan? Or would you as a parent say, oh my god, sakit hatinya hari ni, kalau dia tak pergi on time, I hantar bekal ke supaya anak I tu makan. So macam mana? What should be the parents' role in this? I'm playing devil's advocate.
Sometimes don't even have to be parents. Even the auntie canteen say, kesian lah. I say lagi kesian if every day become dependent on you.
Yeah, exactly. Sebab Nakib loves to eat. So I totally relate to that. Cumanya I think dia lebih kepada mungkin sebab Nakib tak perlu sampai that part because he eats everything. And memang akak kantin tu or I think they call it the chef there kot. Memang akan bagi double helpings untuk Nakib sebab dia suka makan. Tapi
Again,
makan
that's a
tak.
soft spot.
Makan tu tak apa. But I think the challenge was he wasn't even in line. Dia pergi tempat tu pun macam nak kena pegang tangan. So very, needed.
Heavily supported.
Yeah. So, but over time, he actually could queue with the other kids, and then he had that, apa you kata tu, the first and next tu kan, do this first and then next buat apa. So he could follow it.
So regulate his own.
Betul.
self.
So I think that's where kita tahulah yang macam the Shadow 8 was doing her part, because kita memang tak nak cikgu rasa macam cikgu kelas lah. I kena fikir extra untuk Nakib. When kalau Shadow 8 tak ada pun, he can still be okay. And itu yang the part yang we wanted to hear, yang mana it's not every day anymore. You only come on certain days, and even when the Shadow 8 is not around, there's no report.
There's no letter?
There's no letter. So itu antara benda. And also because he starts to picking up things yang cikgu update. Kalau dulu dia tak berminat pun untuk sit still in the class, because they're always like a bit excited. But once dia dah start self-regulate better and knowing that people are around to support him, dia start picking up the pencil and then wanting to do the the workbooks and whatnot. So those are progresses, little wins I would say yang I am very happy to hear. Just to share, memang my Shadow 8 setiap hari bagi daily report about what he does at school. So walaupun benda tu kadang-kadang very repetitive, yang mungkin is something yang for certain people tak adalah nak baca setiap hari. But those are the reports
But it's still
that
important.
Yeah, those
Because
are
it
the
is a
reports.
fallback.
Yeah, yang I go to macam, ni part yang dia dah start buat ni part yang okay, maybe kena work on lagi and report to the his therapist and all the people that are involved in supporting him lah.
So it's not little wins. They are big wins when it comes to neurodivergent kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it may be little wins to a neurotypical, but it's a jump with neurodivergence. And sometimes when they take that first leap, smooth je untuk mencabar mereka membuat yang lebih
more
baik.
things, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
When you say mencabar, for me, it was the day that I said, okay, I don't have to go down for lunch. I just look from the top, and it was
Smooth.
It was smooth, but inside me was like, I want to go down, but just looking from upstairs.
Yeah, it's the little things that the Shadow 8 will send. Macam, hari ni Nakib dah susun kasut sendiri. So macam bestnya, somebody actually captured that moment for
And
us.
sometimes, like I say, susun kasut is not part of the program. It's not part of the goal also.
Betul.
Right?
So those, big wins lah sebenarnya. But
Actually, they are big wins.
So yeah.
So I would like to now ask, could you describe to the listeners, maybe what are core memories? Well, your journey maybe is not as long, Puan Nadira. It's, but still, I'm sure in this journey with PLA, there are some core memories that suddenly make you sit back and say, oh, this was worth it. And why it was.
I think it just jumped on me because I remember taking a photo after that session with my Shadow 8, Felicia at that time. I mean, Nakib's Shadow 8. Dah jadi mine juga. She's shadowing me too. Apa ni?
She's your PI. She's not your Shadow 8.
Betul lah tu. So, Nakib, we decided to change schools for Nakib. Because we just felt like maybe he could do more at that stage. Sebab memang dah progress. And like I said, even the shadowing was lesser. So we thought, okay, maybe he could move on to the next school. And then it was, and I told you guys as well, yang ada beberapa sekolah rejected him. But there was this school yang actually did assessment for him. And then, untuk Nakib, the first round, we were very anxious, me and my husband Faiz. Kami tunggu like sampai habis session tu kan. Macam, okay ke Nakib? Boleh ke kan? Macam, because it's such a big school. And then Felicia came back and cakap, I think he did okay. Dia pun nervous. So I macam ya ke. Tapi the good thing about that school, dia memang bagi peluang in the sense yang dia bukan sekali je. Dia kata okay, datang lagi another day. Because you know, one day cannot be the only time yang you assess a child fairly sebenarnya kan. So we came to the second one. He did really well. So macam kita orang macam dah very positive lah. And then tapi dia kata ada part yang macam nakik macam okay, ada part yang tak okay. So boleh tak nak another session? Yang to us is very positive because biasanya they will stop at 2 sessions. So bila datang third session tu, the administrator was like macam boleh ni. Kita dah happy betul lah. Lepas tu, but we were so happy, terlebih awal happy lah sebenarnya. But anyway, I think the core memory was that we just told Felicia then and there, I don't think we could have done this if without you supporting Nakib. Takkan sampai kepada tahap yang kita nak try pun. Sebab, you know, the biting face, the self-regulate, dia untuk self-regulate proses tu macam sebenarnya memakan masa. Sebab, yalah, you know, being neurodivergent.
All of them are individual.
Yeah.
All of them are individual.
Yang sometimes kita pun tengok ada cikgu macam boleh, ada cikgu tak boleh. Tapi why should we expect so much from others kan juga. I think like I said lah, I think from my exposure tu, I don't really set that high expectations. Tapi yang penting dah cuba yang terbaik. So bila dapat buat sampai 3 assessment dekat that school, and it was actually giving like us 50-50 vibe. We were just very happy to reach that milestone lah. Walaupun in the end he wasn't accepted because they felt like he still needed a bit more support. Even with the shadow 8 around, we were still happy. So I think itu definitely one of our core memories lah, with having a shadow 8 for Nakib.
Can I just say, having been through that journey, the fact the school gave you 3 chances was super amazing.
Commendable.
Because
Yeah.
for a neurodivergent child, setiap kali dia pergi kepada tempat yang sama, dia lebih comfortable dan performance dia akan bertambah baik. Yeah. So kadang-kadang it takes 5 to 6 times.
Betul. So itulah, I think it's something that I would definitely remember and appreciate really about having this support.
Benji, for you?
So I think for me, a core memory or something that really stood with me. And before I share, I would like to put a disclaimer that every student or every learner is an individual and they all progress at their own pace. They have got their own breakthroughs, their own milestones. So let's not benchmark different kids among themselves. Yeah. So one core memory that stood with me was moving on from struggling with a student in the lobby of a school all the way to getting the IGCSE results. So for me, getting the IGCSE results was lagi berdebar than my own exams. my own exams, jadi tak jadi tak,
Yeah.
tak apa. For me, it's like because we put in so much effort, and I was a little bit in a way disappointed because the bell curve was moved up. So I actually expected better results, but
Yep.
that is me being a little bit Asian.
Aren't we all?
But it was more than enough. It was
Yeah.
more than enough. So that was one core memory that really stuck with me.
So what you've just described is growing with that child. Yeah. And probably keeping tabs of where they are and what they do. And how do you know to adjust your expectations? Or now that's the gut feel we want to hear about. We keep talking about that. So how do you know when to, we as parents, kita ni kalau boleh, kita nak anak kita tu bawa ketiak tau. Sorry to use that word, but that's the way it is. So here, especially when it's a neurodivergent child, how do you know to let them go? It's like letting a kite fly.
So for me, referring back to the few cases that I've had, we always start off with full day support. So from full day support, we would actually slowly fade off from non-core subjects. For example, if PE, even if he or she is not in line for a while, for 5 minutes, it's okay. as long as the child is able to bring themselves to follow the group, to me that is the first milestone. Eventually, yes, we'll masuk pebarisan sekali. But we got to start with small milestones, small
Betul.
breakthroughs, and eventually, once they have reached once they've checked enough milestones, enough breakthroughs, and backed by data, say that, in the past 6 months, we did not have any issues with a particular subject. Let's try. Let's give it a try. We don't try, we never know. And sometimes when we try, we fail. And that's reality. So if we fail, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's try again. And we do that with every single checkpoint. Every single checkpoint through primary, secondary.
Yeah, I think it's just really important that you check in dengan
Yes.
parents and again the stakeholders lah, siapa yang involved kan. Sebab as much as we try to achieve certain milestones and goals, kalau tak align pun susah. Kan?
That's right.
Dia macam, yelah.
Parents got different expectation. PLA got different expectation.
Betul.
If school got different expectation.
Yeah, so it's a lot of work, tapi it's really worthwhile bila kita tahu the child gets the right support and, thrive.
Yeah.
So,
I think listening to both Wira and Benji, in the context lah, where there's no formalization, I want to just express gratitude, where Ibu Bapa is taking own initiative, usaha Ibu Bapa, to provide access. In the end of the day, is the inclusion, sama ada perdana or special, just to have an opportunity untuk membelajar. And listening to Benji, that passion, that self-motivation to then meluahkan that motivation also to your client. And in fact, listening about the treater at the canteen, the scaffolding or the support you're giving to canteen chef is that co-regulation that is happening. It is not only in the classroom, it's not only with the teachers.
Yep.
Of course, we look at the formal stakeholders, the therapists, but it's the surrounding.
Community, the wider community.
Is the individual client, student punya, I keep using the word scaffold lah, because we believe and you believe that the child has got the ability to get there. Timing dengan the typical kids not same, right? The voice for the student that you're supporting and assisting, and then the parents' desire to provide that assistance is very heartwarming, and I would say to the authorities lah, to the authorities, formalize this, whether in training, whether in organizing of a association, so that the professionalism is guarding, a lot of the gut feels. There is a lot of training available.
Pada satu seminar yang saya pernah hadir, saya jumpa pakar daripada Hong Kong. And mereka telah beritahu bahawa Hong Kong University mempunyai structured Shadow Aid training and program. So mungkin
On a tertiary level.
Or the tertiary level at university, Hong Kong University. So ini adalah mungkin satu daripada inisiatif yang kerajaan boleh fikirkan untuk memenuhi apakah keperluan anak-anak neurodivergent kita di Malaysia. Sebab satu structured program tu memang sangat penting supaya parents yang dalam keadaan desperate itu tidak akan ditipu lagi. Sebab resources pun kita guna untuk memberikan skill ataupun kemahiran yang terbaik kepada anak kita untuk mendapatkan progress yang betul. In line of that, since Kakak and I have already spoken about it, we want to hear from both of you what would be your aspirations looking at the future of PLAs in this country.
Okay. Do I start? You?
Go ahead.
I think the whole point ialah kita kena faham yang untuk parents ya. Saya rasa speaking from the perspective of parents, of course my first question was like why I kena ada PLA ni? Because I have to sebenarnya fork out money. Saya kena actually spend more, dan sangat penting soalan information tadi yang Anit cakap, yang mana kerajaan patut actually perkenalkan this kind of support, sebab everyone deserves to have access to inclusive education. And in fact, bila kita tolong kanak-kanak neurodivergent ni, satu kelas pun sebenarnya benefit from it, kan? Itu satu. So from parents' point of view, yes, I would love to have that option or that support given by the government. But at the same time, kita tahu yang kita are still working on it. I think inisiatif yang dicuba adakan pusat autism setiap negeri tu pun is one step forward.
Yes.
Every little progress matters. But at the same time, I think untuk parents out there juga yang sebenarnya kalau you dicadangkan untuk go for this PLA, go for it, because it's obviously suggested for a reason juga. Sebab like I said, awareness dah makin banyak. Jadi kalau nampak ada keperluan tu, tak perlu rasa macam you haven't done enough, but rather macam okay, this is the next step. So don't feel like you yang tak dapat buat dengan terbaik untuk anak you. That's why you kena ada shadow aid. Sebab that's what I felt. Yang tadi itulah awal-awal tadi saya ada sebut tadi kan. Tetapi keduanya pastikan yang memang PLA ni bukan the permanent solution. Yang tadi, yang mana sepatutnya mereka support supaya anak you dapat be independent. That's the goal. But at the same time, make sure you get the right PLA, because kalau kita main ambil saja sesiapa untuk jadi PLA pun, itu akan jadi masalah, sebab ialah either regress ataupun you will feel like why did I pay for you? You know what I mean? So benda tu ialah one thing yang kita kata that's why it's really important kita bekerjasama, berkolaborasi dengan semua stakeholders yang terlibat dalam nurturing our neurodivergent child. So that's why I think I would like to highlight where Axon is trying to come in. Kita memang sangat support untuk having this PLA, sebab kita tahu some of the special needs children over time, when they have enough intervention, enough therapy, dia akan transition kepada mainstream school. Tetapi part transition tu yang mereka sangat perlukan support, and we hope that we can actually match parents to PLAs. So itu yang kami cuba buat at the moment, and even upskill the PLAs supaya dia tak rasa yang dia bekerja juga on their own, because yalah bila you dah shadow the child, you dengan child tu je lah, but we will be here at Axon untuk sama-sama support and provide you access to trainings and whatnot. So those are the aspirations lah yang sebenarnya kita nak equip everyone in the neurodivergent ecosystem supaya kita boleh help them to thrive even better, insyaAllah.
Okay, one more question before we move to Benji. Apakah aspirasi Puan kepada sekolah-sekolah? What would you like to see mainstream schools doing better?
I think
in your perspective, through your lens.
Yeah.
Because you do have neurotypical kids and you
Betul.
have a neurodivergent child too.
It's actually a bit challenging and tricky to answer that. Sebab I think I went to quite a few schools, but I think first and foremost mungkin beri peluang tu sangat penting lah kot. Kan? Don't say no immediately, because shutting doors memang orang kata one door closes, another one opens. But I think everyone will face a moment yang kalau you bagi peluang tu, it will be very much appreciated, and even orang kata diambil dengan baik untuk buat lagi baik. So mungkin itulah dulu kot, bagi peluang dulu. Sebab yang lain tu saya rasa dia banyak orang terlibat kan. Yalah macam dari segi pentadbiran, administratif dan the other stakeholders. But the first person you meet tu yang maybe request untuk beri peluang untuk anak dia tu, mungkin hear them out first ke juga. I don't know, it's a bit itulah. Something yang we'll get there.
I think access lah.
Yeah.
Opportunity and access, yeah.
Betul. That's right.
Thank you.
Benji.
I think my aspiration would come from a wider standpoint. And two words that stuck with me is keperluan and kemampuan. Kadang perlu, tak mampu. Then the question is, I have met parents who say that, hey, my child is struggling in perdana. Nak masuk PPKI, mungkin sayang juga. What do I do? And international school, private schools is not an option. So this is the weight that I actually have with me. From a national system standpoint. And how do we go about it? How do we go about it? Bridging this gap. So my aspiration is to see efforts. Of course, like I mentioned, every state have got one pusat autism, tapi terus terang tak cukup pun. So I don't know if that is just for the sake of meeting checkpoints, or is it really practical, or what is a more practical way forward as a nation?
Okay, and Benji, what's your aspiration for teachers in mainstream schools and their attitudes to neurodivergent children?
Okay, so my aspiration for mainstream teachers is probably a one-liner or two-liner. There is more than one way to learn. There's more than one way to learn. And if a child needs to learn sitting on a gym ball, so what? If a child needs to learn math standing up, that's okay too. Because our whole objective during that period, always remember that during that period, we are trying to teach a concept and one particular goal. Whether it is a particular science concept, a particular math concept. Sitting nicely is a bonus. Sitting quietly is a bonus. If the child needs to move a little bit, I think it's still okay. So that is my aspiration for mainstream teachers.
Kakak, from an allied health perspective, anything to say to what we've just heard our wonderful speakers tell us today?
The individual requires, I believe, for success, both the therapeutic intervention as well as the learning intervention. And I think the PLA, or the learning support, is a very important stakeholder, recognizing the different level of support. Again, the independence that's desired and still need also an acceptance that the interdependence is important. I love how Nadirah mentioned, give that opportunity to learn. And Benji just said it beautifully, in a different way. So the additional stakeholder in this instance, the triangulation is actually quite large. The parent, the therapeutics, and the education system.
Okay, for me, what comes across is all of you just want the best for the child.
Absolutely.
Right? And they want them to reach the best potential.
Mm.
And Kakak used the word scaffolding. Let's say from scaffolding, it becomes support. And from support, it becomes a one-sided crutch. And from a one-sided crutch, you gave them the ability to walk and run and then integrate. So that is the aspiration for the neurodivergent children who can make it that way with support. Thank you so much for listening to us today. And thank you so much to our guests for providing these amazing insights. Kami sangat bersyukur sebab ini adalah permulaan sesi persekolahan tahun 2026 dan ada ramai anak-anak neurodivergent yang memerlukan sokongan. Dan kami harapkan dalam episod ini anda sebagai ibu bapa dapat mendapat idea-idea bagaimana untuk navigasi, how we call navigate, kesusahan atau cabaran yang dialami oleh anak-anak anda. Please leave us a comment. Please like, share, subscribe. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Kita Family Podcast always likes to hear from you and your challenges in the school system and the kind of supports you would like. so that we could talk about it in our next episode or a coming episode. Our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to both Datin Wira Nadirah and Benji for being here today.
Thank you.
And we hope to have more conversations. It feels very short. But thank you once again. We are all signing off from episode 86, Kita Family Podcast. Bye.